President Trump recently signing a proclamation that suspended the entry of foreign nationals seeking to study or to participate in exchange programs at Harvard University. While the proclamation has temporarily been blocked, the risk lingers not only for the university, but also potentially for American innovation and business creation. According to our next guest, Harvard among the top universities with the highest number of bachelor degree recipients who are also founders of unicorn startups. Here with more on what's at stake for America's startup boom, we're joined by Ilya Strebulaev, professor at Stanford Graduate School of Business. Ilya, thank you for being here. So
Thank you for the invitation.
We've sort of been trying to get our hands around what could be a potential economic impact, not just for Harvard, but more broadly, the impact on innovation and business creation in the U.S. So what has your research found in terms of the numbers?
Well, if we look at all the unicorns, which are typically very successful venture capital-backed startups with a post-money valuation of at least $1 billion. So those are the most successful companies you will hear from the venture capital world. What I found out after my team and I at Stanford studied all the founders of those unicorns, then 4 out of 10, really more than 4 out of 10 of all these unicorns are foreign born. They are first generation immigrants. And if we include second generation immigrants, then that number will go to 7 out of 10 founders.
Ilya, it's interesting in terms of where these successful founders are coming from. It seems like per your data, India for the gold, number one, Israel in second place. Why those two countries, Ilya? What do you think explains that?
Great question. There are different explanations. So India is a very large country with a relatively good IIT education system. And indeed, we have 90 Indian founders who came to the United States from India and then founded US-based unicorns. Israel is a high-tech nation. In fact, a very interesting statistics about Israel is that if Israel were just one of the US states, then it would be the 5th most important state in the US in terms of the number of unicorn founders.
And Ilya, what I think is interesting about what your research found is that they're not just creating startups, they are creating them here in the US, and then presumably they're staying in the US. In other words, they're not creating it and then going back to their home countries. So they're hiring here, they're innovating here, they're, again, creating businesses here.
That is correct. That is correct, which is most of the unicorns that we study were founded in the US. Some of the unicorns were founded outside the United States, but then the founders brought them here. And those founders, for the most part, staying here.
Oh, and in your research, have you found, and again, as we talked about, the Harvard University order from the White House has been temporarily blocked. But, and I don't know if you've had a chance to do new research yet, but I do wonder what you've seen in terms of any kind of chill on this kind of activity, or if foreign students are still clamoring to come to the US.
So far, I haven't seen any chill. Foreign students still would love to come to the United States to study and also to found companies. I'm seeing a lot of students at Stanford from outside the United States who would like to come and who are founding companies. Many of my students at the Stanford Graduate School of Business are from outside the United States, and they found startups. Some of these startups also becoming very, very successful venture capital-backed companies. But I think something is very important to mention is that people are coming to the United States because the US has really unique venture capital innovation ecosystem. It is in Silicon Valley, but really also beyond, just in the United States. As a result of this, if all these founders from India, from Israel, by the way, Canada is in the bronze place, and other countries would not be able to come, then it's not that they will go and found those unicorns in other countries. I think that it will be much more difficult to do so. So I think what's going to happen likely is that we will just see less innovation. Of course, the US will suffer, but also we'll see less innovation globally.
Ilya, when you say a unique venture system, what makes it unique?
It makes it unique along a number of dimensions, but one important dimension is that we have the venture capital funding throughout the entire life cycle of a startup, which is we have a lot of what I call pre-VC, pre-venture capital funding, like angels, seed funding. Then we have early stage venture funding. Then we have late mezzanine, late stage, and then we have private secondary markets and then IPO. If we go to many other countries, for example, India or Israel that I mentioned, but also Europe, but also South America, Africa, or Asia, in fact, there will be pockets of venture capital activity, angels, or early stage venture capital, but there will be the entire, so to say, supply chain of venture capital funding, and I think that is very important. Another very important characteristic of the United States is the critical mass, something that economists call thick markets. That is really important. Let's think about Silicon Valley. Now, many startups fail. We'll talk about unicorns, but many startups fail. The beauty of thick markets is that, let's say you're a founder, let's say you're an employee of an early stage startup, and your startup failed. Well, in many other markets, you will have no chance to do anything else. Here, because of the thickness of the markets, you can join either a large company, say Google, or you can join another startup team. And as a result of this, we see a lot of turnover. We see a lot of turnover of people. We see a lot of turnover of ideas. And that leads to higher startup rate, higher successes, but also leads to more employment.
Ilya, this is all really interesting. I guess I would ask the other thing besides the attempt to put curbs on foreign students at some U.S. universities. Of course, we've also seen some cuts to research funding for universities. Does that also feed into that VC pipeline?
It, of course, does. So my team and I produce what we call the Unicorn Report, which is the great details about all the American unicorns for the last 25 plus years, but also about all the unicorn investors and also unicorn founders. So just check the Unicorn Report. And what we, of course, show, perhaps not surprisingly, is that if you look at unicorn founders, then a vast majority of them did graduate from top US schools, from top 30 US schools, not just Stanford or MIT or Harvard, but from the top schools. And many of them not just got educated there, but also were affiliated there. For example, many of my colleagues at Stanford are founders of startups, and some of them founded very successful VC-backed companies that went on to become unicorns. And as a result of this, I think that especially because top American universities are what I call interdisciplinary, and I think also unique in a way that we teach and do research at the same time. For example, so I'm not doing engineering research, but I'm doing research on venture capital and innovation. When I teach my students, let's say I teach my Stanford MBA students, I teach them every single time mention my research in my class. And I think that that is a relatively unique feature of the US educational ecosystem. So research is really a part of teaching as well. If we take out research, I'm sure that our teaching is going to become much of less value add.